It shows a very faint sort of image of a crucified man. And the crucified man calls us to remember Jesus' death and resurrection.
A cloth that won't answer, a filmmaker who can't look away, and now, a machine asked to break its silence. Here is the story that brought you here, that Mel Gibson, the filmmaker, somehow decoded the Shroud of Turin, and that when an artificial intelligence was finally turned loose on it, the answer it gave back was haunting. So let me be honest with you before we take another step. The cloth is real. The blood on it is real. The scientific war over its age is real, and it has raged in laboratories for almost 40 years. But the frame around tonight's story, the idea that a Hollywood director cracked a code, or that a machine handed down some ghostly verdict, that is a storyteller's invitation, a dramatization, because the truth of this cloth needs no help from us. It is strange enough on its own. So, what is the Shroud of Turin? It is a single length of linen, about 14.5 feet long, 3.5 feet wide, woven in an ancient herringbone pattern, and across its pale sepia surface lies the faint, ghostly imprint of a man, front and back, head to head, as though he had been laid upon one half of the cloth and the other folded over him. He is bearded, he is unclothed, and his body carries in quiet detail the wounds of a Roman crucifixion, scourge marks scattered across the back, punctures at the wrist and the feet, a wound in the side. For centuries, the faithful have called him by one name. The science, more carefully, calls him only the Man of the Shroud. Its documented history does not begin in Jerusalem, it begins in France. Around the year 1354, a knight named Geoffroy de Charny placed the cloth in a small church in Lirey, and almost at once it drew suspicion. By 1389, the local bishop, Pierre d'Arcy, wrote to the Pope claiming the shroud was a painted fraud, that an artist had even confessed to making it. But the story is not quite so tidy. That same bishop was locked in a bitter dispute over the pilgrim money the cloth was drawing in. And when Pope Clement VII finally ruled, he did not call it a forgery. He allowed it to be shown as a representation, an image, not the true relic, a careful political compromise. And here is the detail that troubles the forgery theory. When modern scientists searched the cloth for the paint such a masterpiece would demand, they could not find it. The cloth passed to the powerful House of Savoy, and in 1532, a fire tore through the chapel where it was kept. Molten silver from its reliquary burned clean through the folded linen, leaving a row of scorched, symmetrical holes, wounds that the Poor Clare nuns quietly patched 2 years later. It came to Turin in 1578, and there it has remained. Only in 1983, by the will of Italy's last king, did it pass at last to the Vatican, which now keeps the most studied object in human history. For most of that long history, the image was simply a faint stain, and then came 1898. An amateur photographer, Secondo Pia, was permitted to photograph the cloth, and in his darkroom, as the glass plate slowly developed, something happened that stopped him cold. On the negative, the reversed image, the faint, confusing blur resolved all at once into a vivid, lifelike human face. The shroud, somehow, behaves like a photographic negative, centuries before anyone on Earth knew what a photograph was. And the mystery deepened again in 1976, when two researchers, John Jackson and Eric Jumper, fed a photograph of the cloth into a device called the VP8 Image Analyzer, a machine built to turn brightness into height to map the surface of the moon. Feed it an ordinary photograph, and you get a flat, mangled smear. Feed it the shroud, and a perfect, three-dimensional human body rises up out of the screen. The darker the image at any point, the closer the cloth had once been to the body beneath it. The image holds depth, real, physical depth. No painting on Earth does that. And how the image was made remains the deepest question of all. There is no pigment that explains it. The microscopist Walter Macrone argued for iron oxide and paint, and was fiercely answered by chemists who found no binder, no brushstroke, in the image itself. The coloring is impossibly thin. It rests only on the outermost fibers of each thread, less than 1,000th of a millimeter deep, leaving the inside of every fiber clear and colorless. And beneath the bloodstains, there is no image at all, which means the blood reached the cloth first before whatever marked it. In Italy, at a research center called ENEA, the physicist Paolo Di Lazzaro spent 5 years firing ultraviolet lasers at raw linen and found that he could, just barely, reproduce that same impossibly shallow stain, but only across a tiny patch, the size of a coin. To mark a whole human body this way would take a burst of light that no natural process we understand can explain, which brings us to the war. The long war over the cloth's age. In 1988, with the Vatican's permission, a corner was cut away and sent to 3 laboratories: Oxford, Arizona, and Zurich. Working independently, each measured the carbon-14 in the fibers, and independently they agreed. The flax had been grown sometime between roughly 1260 and 1390, medieval. For much of the world, that single test ended the mystery. But the scientists who had studied the cloth itself were not convinced. Raymond Rogers, a chemist from Los Alamos and no friend of fringe theories, examined threads from that exact corner. And he found something strange. Cotton spliced in among the linen and traces of dye, found nowhere else on the cloth. His conclusion, that the tested corner was a medieval repair, invisibly rewoven into the older fabric. He measured a second cloth too, vanillin, a compound that slowly disappears from aging linen. The main body of the shroud had none of it left, a depletion he estimated would take well over 1,000 years. And then, in 2022, a team led by Liberato De Caro tried a different method altogether, measuring how the cloth's cellulose had decayed using X-rays. Their result placed the linen not in the Middle Ages, but in the 1st century. It's aging nearly identical to a scrap of fabric from the fortress of Masada. But hold on, because the critics have their answer ready. Heat, humidity, the violence of that 1532 fire. Any of them, they argue, could have aged the fibers falsely and thrown the X-rays off. No one has ended this. The cloth keeps its age to itself. And then there is what lies inside the fibers. The blood is real, human blood. Chemists confirmed it, finding the faint chemical markers a body leaves behind. Some studies call it type AB. That remains debated. The rivulets running down the arms fall at the precise angles a dying man's blood would, as he shifted his weight on the cross, simply to draw breath. In the dust of the cloth, an analyst found a rare limestone, travertine aragonite, that matched the stone of ancient tombs near Jerusalem. A Swiss criminologist, Max Frey, lifted pollen from its surface and identified desert plants that grow only in the lands around the Holy Land, though skeptics have long warned that his samples could have been contaminated. And there is a second cloth. In a cathedral in Oviedo, in northern Spain, lies the sudarium, a face cloth bearing no image at all, only the chaotic stains of blood. Tradition says it covered the same head before the burial. It carries the same blood type, and when it is folded and laid over the face of the shroud, the stains align, wound for wound. Two cloths separated by 1,000 miles that seem to remember the same wounded man. So where in all this does the filmmaker come in? Mel Gibson is an artist and a devout traditionalist. He is not a scientist. The idea that he decoded anything is, once again, our story's invention. But his fascination is entirely real. When he made The Passion of the Christ, he has said that the brutality on screen, the scourging, the mechanics of the crucifixion, was drawn directly from the wounds on the shroud. And in early 2025, on a widely heard podcast, he spoke of it again, describing a 1st century man about 6 feet tall, completely scourged, and saying of his belief in the resurrection that nobody dies for a lie. He even claimed that science had verified the cloth as ancient. And here I have to be honest with you, gently, it has not. The 1st century findings are real, but so is the medieval carbon date, and the debate between them is very much alive. Gibson speaks as a believer, drawing strength from the evidence. The evidence itself has not closed the case. And the machine? The artificial intelligence in our story is real. xAI's Grok, in its 4.3 version, released this very spring. It can hold close to 1 million tokens at once, which means it could read every major study of the shroud, the 1988 results, Rogers' chemistry, De Caro's X-rays, all in a single pass, and weigh the images against the words. But here is what a machine like that actually does and does not do. It does not receive a vision. It does not sense the divine. What it can do is lay every contradictory dataset side by side, set the carbon date against the X-ray date, and calculate the sheer improbability that a medieval forger faked blood chemistry, 3-dimensional depth, and the pollen of Jerusalem, centuries before any of those things could even be measured. But its honest answer would not be a haunting verdict. It would be something quieter and harder. It would map the whole contradiction in full, and then admit, as every scientist before it has had to admit, that it cannot close the gap. So here is where the investigation ends, not with an answer. The Shroud of Turin has been photographed, irradiated, sampled, and fought over for more than a century, and it has surrendered nothing final. It may be the most studied object on Earth, and it remains the least resolved. The filmmaker did not decode it. The machine did not break its silence. Those were our inventions, the way we always reach in the end for a final answer. What is real is the cloth, the blood, the face that should not be there, and the strange, patient way it goes on refusing to tell us who he was. Perhaps that is the only haunting that ever mattered. Not a ghost inside a machine, but a question that simply will not die. I'll leave it with you.